Have you ever tried to argue with someone who simply refuses to listen? Have you ever felt that no matter how much logic and clarity you present, the other person just won't change their mind? And worse, have you noticed that this stubbornness often doesn't come from a lack of knowledge, but from an active resistance to critical thinking? Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German theologian who stood against Nazism, believed that stupidity is not just a weakness of intellect, but a destructive social force, something even more dangerous than evil itself. To him, an evil person can be confronted and stopped by reason or morality. But a stupid person? They don't even realize they're wrong. They wholeheartedly believe in what they say, reject any attempt at reflection, and because of that, they become the perfect instrument for tyrannical forces. This idea brings us to a disturbing question. Is stupidity just an individual trait, or can it be cultivated and strengthened on a massive scale? Are society, governments, the media, and social networks pushing us toward a state of shallow and conformist thinking? Bonhoeffer's theory gives us a troubling answer. Stupidity is not a problem of intelligence, but of will. People can be brilliant in some areas and yet act completely foolish in others. This happens because stupidity isn't about a lack of knowledge, it's about the refusal to think critically. And worse, this refusal spreads like a virus, turning entire societies into conformist masses that accept any absurdity without question. In this video, we're going to explore how stupidity has become a social force, how it is used by those in power, and most importantly, how we can resist its influence to avoid becoming unwitting agents of our own destruction. If you've ever felt like the world is becoming increasingly irrational or that arguing has become pointless, stick with me until the end, because the answers we'll uncover here might just change the way you see society and even yourself. Stupidity is an intriguing phenomenon. It is not merely a lack of knowledge or an occasional lapse in judgment, but something much deeper and more dangerous. Dietrich Bonhoeffer saw stupidity as a state of mind, a form of resistance to critical thinking that can turn individuals into unwitting instruments of destruction. But what exactly makes someone become stupid? And why, according to Bonhoeffer, is stupidity even more dangerous than evil? The first great trap of stupidity is that it does not recognize itself as such. While ignorance can be corrected with knowledge, and evil can be confronted with ethics and justice, stupidity protects itself through absolute certainty. The stupid person has no doubts, does not question their own ideas, and often does not even perceive the complexity of the world around them. They cling to simplistic explanations, absolute truths, and ready-made narratives that eliminate the need for reflection. And this blind conviction makes them impermeable to any rational argument. If you've ever tried to have a conversation with someone who simply repeats prepackaged phrases without considering any contrary evidence, you've already seen Bonhoeffer's theory in action. The most disturbing aspect of stupidity is that it does not manifest only in isolated individuals. In fact, it grows and strengthens in specific social environments. Bonhoeffer observed this during the Nazi era, when he saw how seemingly rational, ordinary people began to accept and justify the regime's atrocities without question. Stupidity, when it becomes collective, can transform entire societies into machines of blind obedience. And that is why it is more dangerous than evil. While evil requires intent, stupidity acts automatically, without the need for awareness or reflection. The curious thing is that stupidity often walks hand in hand with power. When an individual finds themselves in a position of influence, they may begin to surround themselves with people who only reinforce their beliefs, eliminating any criticism or questioning. This creates a vicious cycle. The more power someone has, the less they need to justify their actions with rational arguments, as their authority alone guarantees them followers. Authoritarian leaders, for example, do not need to be intelligent or strategic. They only need to be convincing enough to attract those who prefer the comfortable certainty of obedience over the unsettling uncertainty of critical thinking. This phenomenon is not limited to politics. Have you ever noticed how, in corporate, academic, or even family settings, some people simply refuse to think independently, preferring to repeat whatever they hear from authority figures? This happens because stupidity is not about a lack of intelligence, but rather about conformity. A stupid person doesn't bother to question things because deep down, they don't want to bear the weight of thinking. It's easier to go with the flow, accept what is said, and believe that others have already done all the thinking for them. And perhaps the worst part of stupidity is that it feeds itself. The more someone gives into it, the harder it becomes to break free. Bonhoeffer observed that stupid people not only reject rational arguments, but also feel threatened by them. In other words, when confronted with facts that could shake their beliefs, they don't analyze them critically. They react with hostility, doubling down on their certainties. This creates a psychological bubble where any attempt to bring a stupid person back to reality becomes useless, as they perceive it as an attack. And this leads us to a troubling question. Can stupidity be reversed? Bonhoeffer believed that you can't simply reason with a stupid person because they are not operating within the logic of rational thought. The only way to break this cycle would be through direct experience, something so overwhelming that it forces the individual to confront reality in a way they can no longer ignore. But this is a painful process, often too slow to prevent the damage that stupidity can cause along the way. If stupidity is such a dangerous force, how does it spread? How can an ordinary person become an agent of it without even realizing it? And more importantly, is there any way to protect ourselves before it's too late? Stupidity, when isolated, is merely an individual trait. But when it spreads, it becomes a powerful social force, capable of shaping history and redefining the course of entire societies. Bonhoeffer realized this when he observed how Nazism not only gained followers but also managed to turn millions of people, who might never have committed a cruel act on their own, into silent and often enthusiastic accomplices of one of the most brutal regimes in history. How did this happen? Why did ordinary people, who under different circumstances would be peaceful, moral, and even intelligent, allow themselves to be swept up by a destructive ideology? The answer lies in the relationship between stupidity and power. When someone becomes part of a group, especially one that feels empowered by a leader or an ideology, they undergo a subtle but dangerous psychological shift. They begin to outsource their thinking. In other words, they stop questioning the information they receive and instead blindly trust whatever they are told. This creates a dynamic where the responsibility for critical thinking is handed over to a figure of authority, and the individual feels relieved from the burden of analyzing the complexity of reality. The result is a process of intellectual disintegration, where obedience becomes a virtue and doubt turns into betrayal. Stupidity thrives in environments where conformity is rewarded. This can be seen in authoritarian regimes where questioning the government can lead to persecution, but also in more everyday situations such as companies that discourage employees from challenging their superiors or educational systems that train students to memorize answers rather than develop critical thinking. Bonhoeffer understood that stupidity was not just an intellectual failure but a mechanism of control used by those in power to ensure their decisions would never be questioned. When a leader realizes that their followers are not thinking for themselves, they discover that they can say any absurdity and still be obeyed. The problem is that stupidity, unlike ignorance, cannot be corrected with simple information. An ignorant person can learn and change their mind when exposed to new facts. The stupid person, on the other hand, has already made a choice. They do not want to learn. They do not want to question. They prefer to cling to their beliefs because those beliefs give them a sense of security and belonging. This means that stupidity not only perpetuates itself, but actually strengthens when challenged. Hannah Arendt, when analyzing the trial of Adolf Eichmann, one of those responsible for the Holocaust, observed that evil often does not come from sadistic, bloodthirsty monsters, but from ordinary individuals who follow orders without reflecting on the consequences. Eichmann was not inherently cruel. He was a bureaucrat who blindly followed orders, never stopping to ask whether what he was doing was right or wrong. He embodied what Arendt called the banality of evil, the way stupidity can turn any person into an agent of destruction simply because they have relinquished their ability to think critically. But this banality of evil is not confined to the past. It remains present today, wherever people choose not to question what they are told. When someone mindlessly repeats ready-made phrases without analyzing whether they make sense, when they accept a narrative without considering opposing evidence, when they prefer to follow the crowd instead of thinking for themselves, they are contributing to this social force of stupidity. And the scariest part is that the more stupidity spreads, the harder it becomes to fight it, because it not only shields itself from reason, but also despises those who try to present it. This is the true power of stupidity. It not only blinds individuals, but also creates a system where critical thinking is discouraged, ridiculed, and even punished. You can see this in simplistic political speeches that reduce complex issues to empty slogans, in groups that attack anyone who dares to think differently, in ideological bubbles that reject any form of questioning. When an entire group adopts stupidity as a way of life, it creates an environment where thinking becomes a threat and following orders becomes an act of virtue. But if stupidity is so powerful, how does it spread? How can an ordinary person with no ill intentions get swept up in this current without even realizing it? Stupidity, when it becomes a collective force, acts like a virus. It not only infects individuals but also spreads rapidly through entire societies, creating an environment where thinking becomes unnecessary or even undesirable. And the scariest part is that this spread doesn't happen by force. On the contrary, people embrace it willingly. often without even realizing it. But how does this happen? How does stupidity spread so effectively? The first major vector of stupidity's contagion is social conformity. From an early age, we learn that questioning too much can be inconvenient, that disagreeing with the majority can make us outcasts, and that thinking differently can be risky. As a result, many people adopt the beliefs of the group around them, not because they have analyzed and agreed with them, but because it makes them feel like they belong to something bigger. This desire for belonging is so strong that it often outweighs the need to seek the truth. Just look at any ideological bubble. Most of its members didn't arrive at their conclusions through independent thinking, but rather absorbed the ideas surrounding them without questioning. The media and social networks amplify this effect in a devastating way. We live in the information age, but paradoxically, we also live in the disinformation age. Social media creates bubbles where people are exposed only to content that reinforces their beliefs, isolating them from different perspectives and eliminating any chance for questioning. The algorithm doesn't encourage reflection, it encourages repetition. The more a piece of content confirms what you already believe, the more it will be shown to you. And so, stupidity gains strength not because people are incapable of thinking, but because they are continuously fed narratives that eliminate the need to think. Another crucial factor in the spread of stupidity is fear. Dietrich Bonhoeffer observed that stupid people are more susceptible to manipulation because they seek security and simplicity in a complex and chaotic world. And nothing provides that sense of security better than a simple explanation for complicated problems. When a leader or ideology offers ready-made, absolute answers, many people accept them without question, because the alternative, living in a world where everything is uncertain and complex, is far too frightening. And that is where stupidity gains strength, when truth becomes irrelevant, and the only thing that matters is finding a group that offers a comforting vision of reality. The danger of this process is that it not only spreads stupidity, but also protects it. The more an idea becomes dominant within a group, the harder it is to question. People not only stop thinking critically, but also begin attacking those who try to make them think. History is full of examples of this. Totalitarian regimes such as Nazism or Stalinism didn't have to force everyone to believe their narratives. Many did so willingly, because questioning the official discourse meant becoming an enemy. But this doesn't happen only in dictatorships. Even in democratic societies, questioning certain ideas can mean being attacked, ridiculed, or canceled. When stupidity becomes institutionalized, critical thinking turns into an act of rebellion. And perhaps the cruelest aspect of the spread of stupidity is that it requires no effort. Thinking takes work, questioning can be uncomfortable, and changing one's mind can be painful. Stupidity, on the other hand, is easy. It offers certainty, eliminates doubt, creates clear enemies, and divides the world into good and evil, right and wrong, us and them. And the simpler a narrative is, the faster it spreads. Bertrand Russell once warned that society tends to reward ignorance and punish intelligence because simplistic ideas are more marketable, more palatable, and more useful to those who seek control. But if stupidity can spread so easily and protect itself so well, is there any way to fight it? Or are we doomed to live in a world where critical thinking becomes increasingly rare? If stupidity is contagious, how can we protect ourselves from it? The answer lies in what Bonhoeffer believed to be the only cure for intellectual blindness: critical thinking. But thinking independently requires effort and courage. It demands questioning what we are told, recognizing our own ignorance, and most importantly, being willing to change our minds. And that is not always comfortable. The first barrier against stupidity is intellectual humility. Those who believe they already know everything become easy prey for simplistic narratives. But those who embrace uncertainty remain open to learning. Bertrand Russell warned that the true wise person is not the one who has all the answers, but the one who knows how to ask the right questions. Another essential step is resisting conformity. Do not accept something just because everyone else believes it. Stupidity thrives where there is blind obedience, and the best way to fight it is through doubt. As long as there are those who question, stupidity will never be absolute. If you've made it this far, congratulations. In a world where we're bombarded with fast information and easy answers, taking a moment to reflect on something as deep as stupidity is already an act of resistance. Maybe you've remembered situations where you tried to argue with someone to no avail, or you've noticed how certain ideas spread without people ever questioning them. If this video made you think, even for a moment, then it was worth it. Dietrich Bonhoeffer showed us that stupidity is not just an intellectual failure, but a social problem that can destroy entire civilizations. At the same time, he also taught us that there is a way out, the relentless pursuit of critical thinking. And this pursuit doesn't happen in isolation. It is born from dialogue, from the exchange of ideas, and from the courage to question. That's why I want to thank you for watching until now. Your time is valuable, and the fact that you chose to spend it reflecting on something so essential proves that you are part of the minority that still cares about understanding the world instead of just reacting to it. If this message resonated with you, leave a like. Because yes, even the algorithm needs to understand that questioning the world is still worth it. Leave a comment below. Have you felt that stupidity is becoming more and more present around us? How do you deal with it? I'd love to hear your thoughts and continue this discussion in the comments. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Turn on notifications so you can keep exploring deep topics like this one. After all, questioning is the first step to resistance. Now, if you found this video thought-provoking, just wait until you see the 2 videos appearing on the screen right now. One will make you rethink everything you think you know about reality, and the other, well, let's just say it might change your perspective on what it means to be human. But you'll have to watch to find out. See you there.